Greetings, MBAP 516 online students. This is Dr. Jaros, your professor, with a video explanation for how I graded exam number 1. If you have any questions about the grading, please refer to this video. Let's look at question number 1. Why is emotional intelligence, EI, important to good leadership? Which component of EI is most crucial? Explain. Well, this comes from the Goldman article. I got some strange answers here. I got a lot of answers that talked about, the 5 components of EI and, why it's good that, you have social awareness or that you have empathy and all the components, and that was fine. But there was one overriding reason that the author stressed as to why emotional intelligence is important to good leadership. And that's because in the author's research, emotional intelligence was found to be twice as important as technical skills and cognitive intelligence in determining whether a leader was effective or not. Basically, if a leader was high in emotional intelligence, then they tended to perform way better than leaders who were low in emotional intelligence. And this was particularly true in comparison with technical skills and cognitive intelligence as measured by, say, an IQ test. So that was the main answer. That was the answer I was looking for with respect to the first part of the question. Regarding the second part of the question, social skill, not self-awareness, not any of the others. Social skill is regarded as most important because social skill involves getting along with other people, which allows the leader to put the other components of emotional intelligence to work. If you have poor social skills, the other components of EI do not matter nearly as much. All right, let's look at question number 2. How does the size of an organization increase the complexity of a leader's job? Explain. Well, this comes from the article by Lorsch that we covered. And Lorsch emphasized several factors about how, as an organization becomes more complex, this increases, how an organization grows, how it becomes larger. When an organization grows larger, this increases the complexity and the difficulty of the leader's job. First of all, as an organization grows larger, the number of levels that an organization has grows. There are more intervening levels of hierarchy between the leader and people at the bottom of the organization. So it's number one, it's harder for the leader to influence the subordinates at the bottom of the organization because it's simply easier to influence someone when you're speaking with them face to face. And as an organization grows, the distance, the hierarchical distance between the leader at the top and subordinates at the bottom grows, and it's not possible for the leader to meet personally face to face, with hundreds or thousands of subordinates, right? Number 2, the leader's message can get distorted as it passes through communication channels to reach subordinates at the bottom. It's kind of like that old children's game where, you start with a message, one child whispers the message in the ear to another child, who does it with another child, and by the time it gets to the 7th or 8th child, the message has completely become different from what was originally said because of, the distortion that occurs in communication channels. A third reason is because More levels make it harder for the leader to project their competence and charisma to subordinates. Again, this is kind of a function of being able to communicate directly with someone. A key aspect of being an effective leader is being able to convince your subordinates that you're competent, that you're an expert, you know what you're doing, and, your charisma, your personal magnetism, your ability to be persuasive. Again, this is more difficult when you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of subordinates rather than just a handful who are, you're interacting with face to face. And finally, there's kind of an upward informational flow dimension to this as well. As the number of levels in an organization grows, it's harder for the leader to understand the concerns of their subordinates. Okay, just as it's more difficult for the leader to get his or her message to the subordinates at the bottom, it's harder for subordinates to get their message up to the leader at the top. And this makes it difficult for the leader to understand what the subordinates' concerns are and to be responsive to them. So those were the 4 reasons that Lorsch emphasizes and that, constituted the answer to the question. All right, let's look at question number 3. Is offering an employee higher wages or benefits an effective way to motivate workers to sustained high performance? Why or why not? Also, what should an organization do to create consistently highly motivated employees? Well, this comes primarily from the Hertzberg article that we discussed, or that you guys read and analyzed. The answer is no. Offering employees higher wages or benefits is not an effective way to create sustained high performance, to motivate employees to operate at a high level in a sustained, ongoing manner. It may provide a temporary boost, but there are a few problems with using pay and benefits as a method to create sustained motivation. First of all, Hertzberg describes pay and benefits as what he calls a hygiene factor. In his theory, which he was able to demonstrate via research, pay and benefits are primarily something that reduce dissatisfaction. That is, if someone feels they are poorly paid, then they will be dissatisfied, which will hurt their motivation. Right? But paying someone well, or offering them raises and bonuses and other monetary rewards, while that will reduce dissatisfaction, it will not produce actual satisfaction. Okay? And it's actual satisfaction that results in sustained long-term motivation. So it's one of these things that reduces unhappiness, prevents things like absenteeism and turnover, but it doesn't create happiness, which is what is needed to achieve motivation and high levels of productivity. Right? Also, Hertzberg points out, and this is number 2, if you use pay and benefits to try to motivate your employees, this will motivate them, but it will motivate them to seek more pay and benefits. It doesn't motivate them to be more productive per se. So it creates kind of like a false target. And finally, and this is not unimportant at all, offering employees higher pay and benefits to try to motivate them can become very costly to an organization. You're constantly having to ratchet up the pay, because you receive a raise, an employee receives a raise, that makes them feel good for a little bit, but then they get accustomed to that higher pay, and then it's like, okay, give me more, give me more, give me more. And unless you're like Apple, a company with hundreds of billions of dollars of cash lying around, most companies can't afford that. They can't afford to constantly be increasing the pay and benefits of their subordinates. All right, so the second part of the question says, What should an organization do? Well, Hertzberg introduces a concept called job enrichment. Job enrichment is a tool which focuses on what he calls the motivational factors, the factors that really motivate employees at a sustained, ongoing level to perform well. And these are factors like giving employees more responsibility at work, okay, building more responsibility into a job, more autonomy, giving employees more autonomy. That is, not micromanaging the employee, but rather giving them more freedom to determine how they do their job, right? Creating career ladders that provide opportunities for advancement. You know, nobody wants to work, few people will be motivated in a dead-end job that doesn't have career opportunities. Also providing employees with training so that they can grow and learn and enhance their skills, right? So these are the kinds of factors that constitute job enrichment and can create highly motivated employees on a sustained basis. Last but not least, list and describe the 3 major roles that managers occupy. Do all types of managers spend an equal amount of time in each of these roles? Explain. Well, this comes, mainly from the Mintzberg article that you guys read that dealt with, different kinds of managerial roles that Mintzberg found in his research. The 3 main roles are informational roles, interpersonal roles, and decisional roles. Informational roles are roles that involve, manipulating and analyzing and processing information or data that managers receive. Interpersonal roles are roles that involve interacting with other people. These may be, interacting with bosses, interacting with subordinates, interacting with clients, customers, other people that the manager encounters on the job. And lastly, decisional roles are roles that involve making choices among options, because that's what a decision is, right? A decision is making a choice among a range of possible alternatives. And managers spend a lot of time making decisions as well. The second part of the question, do all types of managers spend an equal amount of time in each of these roles? I got decent answers for this, but not the main answer. In most cases, not the main answer. A few students provided the actual answer that was that Mintzberg's research revealed. The actual answer was that Mintzberg found that sales managers spend a lot of time on interpersonal interactions. Production managers spend most of their times in decisional roles, while staff managers spend a lot of time in the informational role. So that's the main answer I was looking for. Many of you told me about the differences in roles that top level, middle level, and bottom level or supervisory level managers occupy. And that was fine. You earned some points for that. But the most points were earned for talking about the 3 kinds of managers that I just discussed before that. And that raises an issue of, you might be wondering why deductions were made from your exam. Well, let me explain that real quick. The way it works is this. When I read your answer, okay, the exam was worth 100 points. So each of the 4 questions was worth 25 points. So when I start to read an answer, all right, let's say it's your exam and I'm reading answer number 1 the answer to question number 1. I assume that you've earned all 25 points, that your score for that question is 25 out of 25. Okay. Then as I read through your answer, okay, if you say things that are incorrect, or if you fail to say things that are correct and should be in the answer, then there is a deduction. And the amount of the deduction depends on, in my opinion, the severity of the error. That is, if you fail to say something that should be in the answer, but it's kind of a minor thing, then you might lose, -2, -3. if you fail to say something that's more important, that's like, central to the question, then it might be, minus 9, minus 10, minus 11, right? And then, when I'm done with your answer, I just take 25 and I subtract, whatever the deductions are, and that's your score for the question. So, a lot of times I'll get a complaint from a student, well, why did I get minus 5 for this? Or well, one way to think of it is, yeah, you got minus 5 for that question. But the other is, that means you earned 20 out of 25 points for that question. Meaning I did recognize that your answer was mostly correct, that you said a lot of good things in your answer, but you lost 5 points because, you missed this or you missed that. So, getting minus 4, minus 5, minus 6 on a question, that doesn't mean your answer was bad. It doesn't. It means, that means you got the answer like 3/4 correct and you earned 3/4 of the points. It just wasn't perfect. So, there were deductions. Anyway, I hope this was helpful.